Okay. Welcome to Into the Channel podcast, primarily about women's football. I am your host, Dino Dissecting, and as always, I am joined by my co-host, Mr. Grant Angle. What's up, man?
I'm feeling all right, my good man. I mean, that was a good game of football. Jess Park scored in the 33rd minute for England to defeat Spain today. So, we're feeling good. But yeah, no, a lot to talk about from that USA-Japan game. What do you say?
I say, well, before we get started, I heard that you have a French bulldog. Tell me about your dog. No, I'm just kidding. That was a tough one. That was a tough watch. I mean, a sort of agonizing last 35, 40 minutes as, you really start to kind of figure out that it just wasn't, it wasn't going to be today that the U.S. women's national team brought home, I guess their 7th straight SheBelieves Cup. A lot of places where we can get started. I've definitely got some thoughts, got some feels. Any place in particular that you want to get the ball rolling? No pun intended.
We did a lot of lineup talk in the preview. I have not checked, Woso Blue Sky right now. I didn't even look at it at all during the match. If I had to guess, there's probably quite a bit of lineup talk happening in the Woso community, especially in the U.S. Women's National Team fan community. I know you had some thoughts. I will pitch it to you, but obviously, sometimes you need a brewski to soften the blow.
Love it. Got it. Got to soften it. Cheers. Cheers to the football.
Cheers to you.
Yeah. Cheers to Japan. Congrats to Japan. Great tournament. Great run. Undefeated. Never lost. And well deserved. They earned it. They earned that trophy or that cup.
Absolutely. No Momoko Tanakawa in what was essentially the final. That's pretty wild. But we should probably talk USA lineup, I think.
Yeah. I mean, my main takeaway here, I kind of feel like this was Emma Hayes' worst performance as U.S. Women's National Team coach by a good bit. To start the game, I thought Crystal Dunn got off to like a really shaky start. Wasn't surprised to see her get taken off at halftime. And then when I saw Shaw kind of warming up, getting ready to come in, I'm like, okay, Shaw's got to be coming in for Heaps here, right? Heaps has been totally ineffective. A couple, dribblers that were just light work for Yamashita in that Japanese defense. Just completely ineffective. No knock on her and her, her resume and everything she's accomplished. In this one, couldn't get anything going at all. So I was actually really surprised to see Ali Sentnor come off. And then when you see the game kind of take its shape in the second half, you realize that a lot of the U.S. Women's National Team big guns are going to be sitting on the bench for the last 35, 40 minutes of this one, just the way the substitutions shook out. So I'm really interested to hear what was your reaction in real time to kind of like the subs and the lineup, and it felt like it got off to a rocky start and then it just got rockier.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with Sentnor. I think it was Melissa Ortiz on the from the sideline report saying that she had asked Emma Hayes about the substitutions, and Hayes said that Sentnor and Dunn both looked a little fatigued out there. I didn't, obviously Emma Hayes knows these players a trillion times better than we ever could. It didn't look like Sentnor looked fatigued in the first half from my eye, but, the camera wasn't always focused on her, et cetera, et cetera. She may have told Hayes that she was tired after the first half. You never know what was going on. On balance, over the course of these 3 matches, the 2 best players for USA were Ali Sentnor and Kat Macario. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I mean, I think Johannes got off to a really good start in this one too. She was like sort of like the U.S. Women's National Team pressure release valve to start.
Yeah.
Like I think when things were scrambling a little bit, I mean, Japan shot out of a cannon in this one. I think we can't really overlook the fact that the first goal happens 2 minutes into the first half. The second goal happens 5 minutes into the second half. I mean, these players are barely, kind of broken a sweat. And I think Japan, pretty much probably by design, wanted to attack the U.S. defense in that way. But
Yep.
Sentnor, she got the halftime interview treatment coming off the pitch. Didn't look that tired. She looked extremely jovial. Really happy to have
Yes.
scored that goal. Crystal Dunn, on the other hand, put in the blender a few different times in that first half. I think that sub had to happen. And honestly, bro, I'm still in shock that Lindsay Heap played the whole 90 plus. I'm literally in shock. I cannot believe it. You look at the Corbin Albert substitution, didn't do a single positive thing until she was into the game, like, I don't know, maybe like 17 or 18 minutes until she actually moved the ball in the right direction to an actual other player on the U.S. Women's National Team. I thought the subs, I mean, it was I don't want to be hyperbolic, borderline disastrous for me.
Yeah, it definitely didn't look good. The subs didn't make a giant difference. I thought Jaden Shaw, was out there doing some good things, using her physicality pretty well. Um, our pal P in the chat points out something that I wanted, two things that I wanted to point out. Newly minted ITC Hall of Famer Emily Sonnet. Sorry for jinxing you, pal. Like, because she did not play well in this one.
Mm.
She runs into Jane Campbell to kind of help create that first goal. So not a great performance from Sonnet. You're right about Heaps, and the thing our pal P points out in the chat is Lindsay Heaps for a number 10 is just so randomly offside so often that I just don't know. Like, there are sometimes where it happens, I'm just like, why are you there? Why are you in that position? It's very bizarre sometimes. And so I Mickey Owen didn't play well either.
Mm.
I was surprised when I saw the lineup come out that Hayes went with the Mickey Owen Sonnet center back duo. I would have started Sonnet though. To be clear, like she was in my starting 11 when we did the preview. I just didn't expect her to play so poorly today.
Yeah, I'm rough look, and then Tierna Davidson comes into the game, immediately looks miles better, is affecting the game on defense and a little bit on offense too. That was very cool to see. Yeah, P's definitely chiming in here. Totally agree with the notion of letting some of the vets go. As mentioned, Dunn I think had a hard time. Heaps as well. Sonnet, I think got a little bit more involved late in the match. I think when their backs were against the wall, but obviously the
Yeah.
game had taken a different shape by then. I want to talk a little bit about the opening goal and who I thought was the best player on the pitch. So Yui Hasagawa,
Mm-hmm.
I guess involved in both goals if you really think about it. But the first one, a super basic throw in. We mentioned very early in the match, the throw in comes in. There's sort of 4 or 5 players like in Yui's orbit. Nobody steps up. I mean,
Yeah.
she can, and we've talked about the constant motion, like the tidal wave of motion that is, that Japan offense. If you give them that kind of time and you're just kind of standing watching, like there are just things happening around you, behind you that you've got no idea. And that's basically what created the goal. Yui, for me, player of the match, but that kind of start, like I feel like that just kind of set a terrible tone for this one.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think Yui Asagawa was the best player on the pitch. You mentioned that like it seemed like Johannes for the USA side was kind of the release valve. You have two of those for Japan between Kumagai and Hasagawa. And
Mm.
Hasagawa just multiple times, I was just kept putting in my notes. Hasagawa resets, takes control of the ball, makes like two moves to just kind of like lose a defender and then just kind of start. And like you're saying, when you get into that 50 plus, 60 plus, and you have a 1 goal lead and your opponent is frustrated, and then Hasagawa's just kind of moving the ball throughout the middle of the field and then, passing it through the back line. She dominated the game in a way that is like not like physically dominating the game, but just like outmaneuvering everybody out there. Incredibly impressive performance by her.
Totally. Yeah, she was awesome. Very sharp, passing on point. Yeah, those little movements, those turns, those little half spins, made it impossible. I mean, she left a couple defenders in the dust a few different times, and then coming out of halftime, the free kick that was The placement on it, incredible. I think when the
Yep.
ball's flying through the air, I'm like, oh, that's a goal. Shout out to Jane Campbell, though. World class save. I mean,
Good
full
save. Yeah.
extension, elevation, gets good contact on it. But then there you go. Fox, Yasmin Ryan kind of fall asleep. Um, let me get this name right. Toko Koga
Koga. Yeah.
from
Koga.
Feyenoord.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just kind of sprints onto it. First one to the ball. Really kind of didn't have a ton of business being first to the ball because I think she started off from a really deep position, but
Yeah.
just caught the defense sleeping, and then a pretty routine putback for Koga on that one to put them up 2-1. And then at that point, you know, Hayes hadn't made the second wave of substitutions, but Sentnor's already off. Jenna
Mhm.
Neiswanger has already come in for Crystal Dunn. And then 7-8, what is it? Yeah, 7-8 minutes later, Hayes takes out Johannes, Yasmin Ryan, Kat Macario to be replaced by Alyssa Thompson, Lynn Biondolo, and Corbin Albert. I mean, I think taking, I don't know, a ton of bite from the offense, and like really putting the offense in a tough spot. The only bite they had from there was Lindsay Heaps biting the top of Saki Kumagai's head on that header, where again she was offsides.
Yes, naturally. Yeah, I think I know what Hayes was trying to do there. Like maybe you put Albert on and hope that she's gonna head down, charge at the goal. You put Biondolo on to try to stretch the field and then try to really like maybe play some long balls. And then obviously Thompson has such a creative passer and is a good long ball passer. Maybe send in some crosses. I think that's what Hayes was going for there. Shout out to Melanie in the chat, who is correct. It's the start of the cycle. The team has potential for tremendous growth. So I don't think we need to sound like too sullen on this podcast. It is always fun to see, U.S. Women's National Team social media. They're not used to losing. So it's kind of like you remember the 2023 World Cup and kind of the reaction to the way those matches played out. Even matches they won, people had reactions to two of those group stage matches. But I think that going back to those late substitutions, like I said, I see what Emma Hayes was trying to do. It did not work at all.
I mean, Corbin Albert, I'm not sure. I mean, we talked about Claire Hutton and maybe like what Hutton looked like in that second match against Australia. Barring injury or load management or something, some other physical, scenario, I have no idea why Albert's in the game in that spot. I mean, I think she can fire from distance, like if the conditions are perfect and like everything kind of works out, but completely ineffective. And I think there was just too many players on the pitch at the same time that couldn't get the chemistry right, couldn't get the decision making right, were not accurate enough in their passing, in their movement. And I mean, I definitely take the point. I definitely take Melanie's point. No need to really sound the alarm in a big way,
Yeah.
but that was a little troubling. Like, I mean, the team, kind of, a word I like to use in this kind of situation, a little rudderless, sort of spinning in circles a little bit, not really sure what to do. Give up 2 goals that I don't want to say they're. I mean, those were defendable goals. I'll say, like,
Sure.
But as the first half wore on, I posted this on Blue Sky and Threads. I would have been shocked, like just watching that first half, if the U.S. was able to hold Japan to just the 1 goal, and then obviously they get the second one in the second half. And once those subs kind of like take hold, there's really no connector. Johannes isn't in there. Coffee's not quite that kind of player.
Mm-hmm.
Heaps is off kilter. And then it's a little bit imbalanced. You got Alyssa Thompson, on one side, Shaw on the other. Shaw, kind of struggled a little bit. She had one really good look, put it right into Yamashita's arms. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't criticize Emma Hayes, the coach, but Emma Hayes, the performance, the lineup today, definitely worthy of some criticism.
Yeah, I think that's well said. That's a good way to put it. managers have bad games, players have bad games. Sometimes the popcorn guy in the stands has a bad game, right? Like you never you never know what's going to happen over the course of 90 minutes. Yeah, the fit of everything too just kind of looked wonky, which
Mm-hmm.
again, like just with the players available to Hayes, there you were going to get some of that. Um, I'm with you though, and not to just turn this into trash some of the players' hours. I sorry, trash some of the players' hour. Even though I don't think we'll be on talking about this match for a full hour. I just taking off Lily Johannes for Corbin Albert. I don't see the value in that. It's just especially there was nothing from Albert's last performance to indicate that she was ready to play in this match against a Japanese side that is very clearly mostly in season and just firing on all cylinders. It's just like Albert's not at that level right now. Not anywhere near it, frankly.
No, and I mean, I think Albert's also a young player. Like not super duper experience as well. Even though she's played in big matches at PSG, played in a couple of big matches, obviously for the USA. I also posted something during the first half with regard to the physicality
Yeah,
because I felt like from a technical standpoint, the U.S. was completely overmatched. It is what it is. Like, we didn't really have the right players. We didn't have the right combinations to be able to keep up technically. And what I posted was like, I think it's time to maybe start thinking about how can we muck this game up? How can we make it more physical? How can we be a little bit bigger, stronger, tougher, faster? I think it may be a little bit of a draw there. Both teams very kind of super athletic from that standpoint. And the two players I mentioned in my notes that started to play that way, Kat Macario, Yasmin Ryan, those are the two that come off relatively early. So
yep,
you take your players that are kind of like trying to make this a little bit more of a physical tussle. You take them off. You talked about Michelle Cooper last
yes,
episode. It's like, well, hey, can we use some of that energy? Emma
right,
Sears, I think, has a little bit of that physical profile as well.
sure.
None of that. We get Alyssa Thompson, Jaden Shaw, Lynn Biondolo, and yeah, the combos were just way off. The physicality, I think, got tempered from there. Like we got a little softer, ended up making it easier for Japan to kind of play their game, keep control of the match.
Yeah, totally. I'm glad you mentioned Michelle Cooper because we got about right before the three subs, and I was just like, maybe Cooper comes in like just to kind of to shake things up. I would have liked to see that. Um, let's see here. Let me just make sure I'm keeping up here. So
Yeah,
Dark in the
shout out to Gulshan, who said what I was trying to say, and it took me about 2.5 minutes to say. She gets it done in 3 words. Ka adds nothing.
There you go. Yeah, I think
Excellent.
that's about. Yeah, I think that's about what happened there. Yeah, Dark pointing out that Hasagawa was just on another level tonight. Totally true. Skin and Bones. Appreciate you rocking with us. Just talking about how it's an experimental roster. We got a lot out of it. As much as you could probably be expected. Lots of new exposure. The new exposure point, Skin and Bones. I love that because Tara Mikione, like I said, did not play well. But here's the thing. You can't get experience and become good at playing in important international games until you play in some important international games. So I take your point there, man, that I think, you gotta get some exposure. You gotta play these type of matches before you get good at them. Um, and so yeah, like like you pointed out, they didn't win their seventh in a row SheBelieves Cup. So that's a little bit of a bummer. But looking at the long game could eventually be a positive. But the Japanese side, they're walking away with the trophy tonight, so they're looking at that as a positive, as they should.
Yeah. And they played really well, kind of end to end. I was really impressed with them defensively too. Let me see. Yeah, I think they take Kitagawa off really early as well. It was wild because like they had some lineup shuffling as well. Like
Yeah,
I was constantly on FOTMob. I'm like, okay, who is this? Who is this? Who's this? Because we went through 6 or 7 or maybe one or two extra names of players to watch, and it felt like there was another 4 or 5 players that we got introduced to in this one that were difference makers.
Yeah.
Obviously the goal scorer early, that one comes from Yuka Momiki from
Momiki.
Leicester,
Yeah.
and the second goal comes from Toko
That's from
Koga, who we mentioned.
I'll tell you, Koga, obviously I don't get a chance to watch a lot of Feyenoord matches. Good size. I think she's only 19.
Yeah,
She
she looked
looks like a real
massive.
player.
Yeah,
Yeah. She,
yeah,
she looked good out there. So, I
big,
mean,
athletic, absolutely.
yep. Yeah, man. I mean, to add that with kind of the speed and precision passing that Japan plays with is a nice mix. And so now let me just do quick mea culpa. I talked in the preview episode where I said, yeah, Saki Kumagai probably might. I don't expect her to be in the lineup. A little older, like in the advanced stage of her career. Shut up, Grant. You're wrong. It was a cup final. Of course, Saki Kumagai is going to play, and she was just hammering players out there, like
Yep.
legally and cleanly. Like you mentioned, she got bit on the top of the skull by Lindsay Heaps, and it's just a bloody mess. Like just outrageous toughness. The only player on this squad that was part of that 2011 World Cup champion team for Japan. So I mean, Kumagai she was out there getting it done tonight.
Yeah, I mean, cool under pressure, um, good movement. Usually, kind of like when we see Kumagai struggle or maybe be a little bit limited, she's getting beat by more athletic players. But the U.S. attack was so basic and so straightforward that, I mean, totally played into Japan's hands. Made, like I said, made it really easy on them. And I think the turn, I mean, I hate to kind of like make such a big deal about Lily Johannes, but I think that really was the sub that kind of ended it. You and I connected real briefly at halftime, and I took the position. I'm like, okay, Heaps has to come off the field, like
Mhm.
not totally ineffective, not posing any kind of threat, distribution not really there. Why not push Johannes up the pitch a little bit?
Yeah.
She's dealing. She clearly has a cool head about her. I mean, I think the sneaky part that I love about Lily's game is when the ball's coming to her, she does the quick 270-degree look around and be like, I'm not going to get caught, napping. You're not just going to come swipe the ball off me without me noticing. And then I think in that 270-degree, you know, getting her bearings, she also figures out where she's going to go with the ball. And I think
100%.
that skill set would have probably, maybe, possibly paid more dividends if you move it up the pitch and then sort of slot somebody in behind her. And then we talked about, maybe starting the game with Sonnet and Dunn potentially on the bench so that you can bring them in and sort of plug them in somewhere. And I think if
Yeah.
had you moved Lily up and had one of those options to go to, that maybe could have worked, in a pinch. Claire Hutton maybe also available there. But you start Dunn, you start Sonnet, you take, those versatile players out of the equation. So I think, and it is tough. The turnarounds are short.
Yeah.
Emma Hayes has to balance minutes. So like, who plays in this match? Highly dependent on who played against Australia, which was highly dependent on who played against Colombia. So all of it's intertwined. Everything's happening in real time. But yeah, all in all, a pretty disappointing performance, I would say.
I think so, and I think it was just surprising to see Dunn not play well, Sonnet
Mm,
not play well, Heaps not play well. I mean, those are your three vets out there in the starting 11, and to once that kind of takes like a frightening or an alarming turn in the first, or pardon me, once that takes an alarming turn in the first 2 minutes, kind of everybody's looking around like, all right, everybody try to settle down here. And, they equalize relatively quickly. Genius pass by Macario into Sentnor. Great first touch by Sentnor, and then to tuck it away. Like, I feel like we probably haven't talked enough about the Sentnor goal because we're just too busy being sad that Sentnor got taken out at halftime.
yep.
But
Amongst
like
other things.
that's the kind of stuff that that you want to see. But again, I just think, I mean, this looked like a Japanese side that came to like play its most of its top players. Because yeah, we didn't see Mura, we didn't see Tanakawa out there, but they were out there ready to win the trophy.
Yeah, and I think speaking of the lineups, we mentioned this on the last episode. Yui plays, I think, the full 90 plus the first match, sits out against Colombia, super fresh for this one, and obviously was dominant. But I do want to talk a little bit about maybe some bright spots. You know, we've had a somber first 25 minutes here. Um,
Sure.
what did you see from the USA that maybe we can, you know, kind of get excited about? I think some of the young players, you know, obviously notch that experience. But anything else that you saw, or say, hey, this is something that I think we can build on, even just from this disappointing final.
I mean, Yasmin Ryan, we talked about her as a potential like big game player,
Mm-hmm.
as like a Team USA player. I mean, I'm going to have to be proven otherwise at this point. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think that whatever the forward room looks like at future, international windows, even with Triple Espresso when they return, I feel like Sentnor and Yasmin Ryan, they should be in the forward room now. I mean, and again, we're early in the cycle. Emma Hayes is going to want to see more players. Obviously, we talked about Sears and Cooper look good in spots too. But man, Ryan, she pushes the pace when she needs to. She swings the ball across field when she needs to. She gets back on defense when she needs to. She just is making a lot of good decisions, and she is helpful like on defense or collecting the ball and getting it forward. I think I walked away from this like obviously in my opinion I think on balance Sentnor and Macario played the best. I might be carve out a separate category. I might be leaving most impressed with Yasmin Ryan after these couple matches.
Yeah, I think I got a note here, 12th minute. Okay, here's what I'm going to read it word for word. Heaps with a tepid header after Yasmin Ryan's preposterous crossfield ball to Sentnor, which was awesome. I mean, that ball traveled probably like 45 yards through the air. And then again, ends with a nothing of a header from the captain. Quick look at the chat. Sindre, absolutely
Our
excited
guy.
to see SK Braun back in Europe. I should have worn my jersey, but I don't know. Maybe. Well, there'll be opportunities. And
Of course.
shout out to P, who mentions that Lindsay Heaps puts another player in a head wrap in a swim cap. Love that.
Nice. Dude, shout out to you, Sindre. Thank you for joining the proceedings. For anybody who might not be aware, Sindre, one of the members of the Braun Battalion, great club over in Norway, SK Braun Champions League heroes last year. Very excited to see them back in the Champions League. Thanks for rocking with us. Yeah, speaking of players in Europe, though, I realize I did not mention. I guess it goes without saying, but Johannes on balance from her time on the field, everything that's just locked in at this point. Johannes makes every single roster from here on out. Even if you are Hayes and you're saying, I'm experimenting, I'm seeing everybody I have in the pool, doesn't matter. She's 17. She has to be on every single roster moving forward.
She just, I mean, for stretches, looks like the best player that we have,
Yep.
and I think to start the match, to go down 1-0 after 2 minutes, after pretty much the entire pregame conversation was how quick strike ability, how much quick strike ability Japan has, and we still find a way to kind of give up a goal within the first 120 seconds. The team turns to Johannes to kind of settle things down, connect passes, hold possession just for a minute so that we don't get beat backdoor again. So not only, I think this is her spot on the roster kind of cemented, but I think for the foreseeable future, she's probably Sharpie, write her in, a couple other players, Germa, Triple Espresso probably has something to say there, and then slot in everybody else around, those handful of players.
Yeah, no doubt. Wouldn't mind just her being sharpened in starting 11 moving forward, obviously, like you say. I mean, full co-sign on that. Other positives, you know what? Let me
Jane Campbell had a nice save. That was, I'll remember that one.
Let's talk about this. So Jane Campbell had a nice save. We don't have our we don't have our keeper yet, right? USA doesn't know who the
Mm-mm.
keeper moving forward is.
No, not
Am
even a
I
little bit.
talking? Am I speaking out of school here? But like I know it, Mandy Hott from Utah Royals. She was on
Mandy McGlynn now.
Mandy
Congratulations on the
McGlynn.
nuptials.
There we go. Okay, there it is. So nicely done. Thank you for bringing that back.
Sure.
I don't think I've done that to a single player since we've been recording. I think I've been on a super hot streak of. I know like Julie Foudy and Luke Wildman were like kind of making fun of each other for like when they would mess up. I don't think I've had a single one this like run a podcast. I finally did it. So Mandy McGlynn, I she was fine in the last one. She looked great in stretches for Utah though. So I
Mhm.
want to see. I definitely want to see more of her playing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know who will. I don't know who else is out there that they need to take a look at. There's more. There are more in the pool for sure. Um, Actually, before I say I don't know, the shadow executive producer of the show who was watching the match with me um, looked over at me at one point and just said Fallon Tullis Joyce should be on the roster and should probably play. I think that's a good shout.
I mean, you should definitely get a look. I mean,
Has
one
to.
thing that we know is, what do they say? When you have three goalkeepers, you really have none. I mean, I think we're probably somewhere in that neighborhood. Um, Thinking about who else, I'm going to leave this match with some positive feelings about Tuna Davidson. I thought it looked really good. We had her in our predicted starting 11, and she came in, did not disappoint. I thought Sam Coffey played pretty well as well, kind of like a little bit of a bounce back. Didn't played better than she did against Australia for sure. Um, but yeah, I think I'm not sure. Like it's tough to like really put your finger on where things went wrong, whether it was like the roster construction or just missing some really key players. Gurma, I'm not sure what kind of difference she would have made necessarily, but definitely on the attacking piece. But three great attacking players up front, you still have to get them the ball. And
Right.
we had Alyssa Thompson, Yasmin Ryan, Kat Macario in the match. Not a ton of opportunities for them just because the service in wasn't there. I think the passing that was effective was happening way, way, way in our defensive half, and that is something young players, like beginning of the cycle, et cetera, et cetera. That's something that we got to figure out. Like we're going to need some sort of offensive connector to make sure that we can pose some kind of threat, sort of in that um, between the 18 and the halfway line. Like
Sure.
we didn't have anything there. Like we didn't have anything there. I mean, it was really just, can we get the ball? Can we sort of like advance it and get like, I don't know, a handful of looks over the course of the match. Um, yeah, just sort of totally dominated, unfortunately, by Japan. And then as the subs kind of happen, the game just seemed to slip further and further away from our grasp.
Yeah. If for folks who might want to subscribe uh, to your push Johannes up the field, well, if you have Hal Hirschfeld to play as your second six or your second
Mm,
defensive midfielder next
great
to
call.
Coffee, you could push Johannes up. There's also this player who had 10 assists in the NWSL last season in only a few matches. Her name's Croy Bethune. She's good between the 18 and the halfway line. She's good inside the 18. She's good anywhere you put her on the field. So that would be a benefit. But you're totally right, man. The midfield was kind of the the empty space. Maybe not empty space isn't the right word, but like just a black hole where possession was going to die for long stretches of this game. You could hear some of the frustration in Julie Foudy's voice. Like
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think it was a heaps turnover where Foudy just goes and they turn the ball over and
Yeah.
Japan has the ball. Like you can tell that she was just getting very annoyed with it. I mean, but again, Fuka Nagano, Hasagawa, Momiki was creeping up into those spaces in the midfield. They got beat in the midfield. I think it's a great call out by you.
Yeah. And I think as the game sort of starts to slip away, Mina Tanaka, and shout out to Melanie who mentions great tournament for Utah Royals fans. Sentnor and Tanaka, go crazy in this tournament. Totally agree
Yep.
there. I thought Tanaka did a great job keeping the U.S. honest because she's like, no,
Yep.
we're not going to sit back. I'm still going to attack. And she's so good at sniffing out goal scoring opportunities. But if the opportunity's not there, she's great at moving the ball, to where it's got to go. And just kind of like keeping the action where they want it. She's not going to force it. She's not going to rip a shot. 1-on-2 or 1-on-3, where she doesn't have the angle. But she's going to make the runs. She's going to make you play her. And even without being a tremendously dangerous goal scoring threat in this one, she had a big effect and put a lot of pressure on US, like made them, kind of defend and kind of keep an eye on where Tanaka was at all times.
Gravity. Yep. That's a great point. You have to account for her. I mean, I think Melanie may have pointed out earlier in the chat that she ends up walking away with the MVP of the tournament.
Yep.
Deservedly so. What, 4 goals, 3 assists, or 4 goals, 2 assists, somewhere in that ballpark. And then had, without getting on the score sheet today, still had an impact. So, and to your earlier point, and I think, our pals are pointing this out in the chat, that like when you talk about a lack of connectivity between the midfield and the attack for USA, complete opposite for Japan. They have total connectivity between the midfield and the attack. And so when you're defending that, you have to account for that. And then you get put in the blender in different situations. So, I mean, Japan, like we always say, one of our favorite teams to watch in the world, no matter what the tournament is, whether it's a friendly, anything, they're always worth watching. And they just remain completely organized at all times. And one more quick shout out to Manchester City goalkeeper Yamashita with the rare knee cramp, it looked like, somewhere in like the 70th minute, where she hadn't really needed to do anything, but when the ball trickles out of bounds and it's time for a goal kick, she just kind of like half-heartedly like grabs her knee and sits down. And I was like, yeah, one of those knee cramps that you get from just standing up. That's typically how that happens. So elite time wasting by her.
Yeah, excellent work by a true professional. Speaking of Japan, we've obviously seen them play well. World Cup championship in their history. They put it on Spain, 2023 World Cup. We saw that.
Right.
I don't want to say it felt, it didn't feel like a mirage in any sense. They were playing great in that World Cup, but it did feel like they were maybe missing a couple elements, like a true heavy hitter, number 9, like a Tanaka, or like a young. I don't know if Fujino had that big of an. She might not even have been on that roster, but you look at Fujino, you look at Tanakawa, players that really can be explosive. They do feel like they have more to offer in attack. More than they did in 23, and I think over the last couple of years. I'm not ready to say that this team. Well, let me just say it. I think this team is probably knocking on the door of the absolute upper echelon of teams, around the world. I think even the U.S. at full strength would struggle with this Japan side.
Oh yeah, no doubt. I'm totally with you on that. Yeah. Okay. So, pals in the chat, please correct me if I'm wrong, but Fujino, I think she had a wonder goal in that 23 World Cup, if I'm, and that's where she first got on my radar. And June Endo looked really good in that 23 World Cup, and that, she's coming back from her. It was either an ACL or an Achilles, so she's on her way back for Angel City. So this team is still missing a very talented, dangerous young player out there. Yeah, I mean, you're right. Tanaka is 30, so let me wait. Oh man, live fact check. Tanaka is okay. Yeah. Tanaka is 30 years old. So obviously, you got a couple more years left in the back end of her prime. But yeah, I mean, this team is absolutely ready. They play a physical style in the sense that it is pass and move, pass and move. Like they're not like bodying you up necessarily all the time, but they're when I say a physical style, they're just playing a running style where just like your mind is spinning and you have to keep moving your legs at all times when you're playing defense against them. Any tournament they're in, they're live to win it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And, obviously they win this one,
Yeah.
probably as an underdog, Duff coming into it for sure. If you're MAs, or maybe if you're on that US Women's National Team staff, um, the very next time you kind of like come together to meet and sort of like figure out where we might go from here, what would be maybe the first thing that you're like, before we get to the 6 or 7 things that we're going to talk about in this meeting, let's start here. How do we fix this issue? What's that issue for you, would you say?
I think it has to be I think it has to be the midfield. I think you got to look at your options and say, okay, well, Hirschfeld's an awfully good player. Probably should give her an extended look. Um,
And
and
you know
then
what?
go ahead.
Credit to you. You were on Hirschfeld for Corbin Albert. I think when the roster dropped, I think that was it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we had a chance to fact check the health situation or the availability situation, but you were definitely on that, and that absolutely was a player that was missing. Somebody that can connect, passes and keep things moving, put pressure, just through distribution further up the field. That just wasn't a player that we had. And then sort of to have, I'm not saying it was a 1-for-1, but to watch those Corbin Albert minutes and to see Albert not really be able to do that with any kind of effectiveness, that was a tough look.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We've been on Hal Hirschfeld watch like since the draft and since we saw her first play at Washington Spirit. It doesn't take a great football mind to realize how good she is, but I think I think that midfield spot is okay. Well, how are we going to take advantage of whatever mix of Coffee, Johannes, Hirschfeld, and then eventually Bethune. And so I don't want to steal any more answers, but I think you were on it earlier. If fixing the midfield or kind of figuring out what you want your midfield rotation to look like, obviously Macario is a great fit at number 10. That means the second question has to be, like you were talking about earlier, do you start transitioning out some of the older players because there's just not going to be room for that past generation?
Fuck yeah, you start transitioning.
Okay. All right. We don't want to overreact, but yes.
No. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, tough spot, but Crystal Dunn obviously, is moving from the NWSL to PSG. Not sure where kind of her conditioning is at. Lindsay Heaps, though, I'm not sure what the excuse was there. I'm sort of fully, and when we talked about the starting 11 show, or when we talked about this on the starting 11 show, and you were saying, hey, there's no way that Heaps isn't in the lineup.
Right.
Dude, I said on the show, I was like taken aback. I'm like, wait, but she's not really producing right now or recently, and she doesn't have really great chemistry with the other players out there. Even a player in her age band, Alin Biandolo, like there doesn't seem to be any chemistry between those two players either. So
Yeah.
I really struggle, other than saying, okay, Heaps is having a great season for Lyon and has the resume that goes back a ton of years, etc. I'm really struggling to kind of figure out what her role is on this team, because I think when you stick her at the 10, it kind of, like we talked about this, it means Macario goes to the 9. It means Sentner goes out to the wing. You take away a lot of the bite to the offense, and I think like if you just shuffle some pieces, maybe move Macario back, that kind of turns her into more of a distributor. And that's where the goal came from.
Yeah.
The goal comes from Macario in a deeper position, getting the ball, bodying, turn, look, find Sentnor up the field. That's your 10-9 combination right there that completely gets neutered. Like we saw it on the pitch, but it completely
Yeah.
kind of gets neutered because we have to have Heaps in that position. Everybody else has to shuffle, somewhere else. And then we end up with an offense that doesn't really make any sense. So to me, I think, probably tactical move number one is, we have the conversation and we say, hey, we we appreciate all the contributions, but the fit just isn't there with the rest of the skills that we have, with the rest of the talent that we have around this spot. There's probably, and you don't really see a lot of like, you know, I really kind of feel, out of turn saying this, but you don't really see a lot of leadership type stuff on the field either. It's not like, she's sort of
Mhm.
like grabbing people and huddling them up and, coaching up the youngins and throwing her arm around people and, doing like, we don't really see a ton of that either.
Sure.
So I feel like that's probably step number one is reshuffling and, redefining what that front four looks like. And then, kind of starting with like a clean whiteboard.
I think that's all totally fair. And so if you bring in Bethune, then yeah, Horan is falling down the depth chart. Shout out to the legend CTX for joining us on the live show. CTX,
Let's
what's up,
fucking
pal?
go.
Asking when will Croy be back? Okay, so she got injured throwing a baseball, which is always what you want from one of your center midfielders. Yeah, not to make light of it, obviously, it's fucking devastating. But old sports injury physio tells me that a torn meniscus usually can take you about 3 to 6 months to come back from to play like heavy physical activity sports. So, injured in September, October, November,
Should be there.
December. So yeah, she should be close, I would imagine, for the start of the season. Haven't seen anything from Washington Spirit yet, but obviously we'll be tracking that. So, what USA back in action in April. Again, a couple matches versus Brazil. So we're gonna be hovering around that timeline. I don't know if you bring Bethune back right away for a couple of high leverage matches against Brazil. Even if they're friendlies, anytime you play Brazil, that's a high leverage match in my view.
I
So
think
yeah,
I think Bethune can handle it. Let's go. Let's turn that page already and let's get Bethune,
sure.
properly set up here.
This is the dynamic between me and Dino, where I'm just like, be careful with your injury, don't rush back, and Dino's like, come on, get out there, the best way to get back is to play, which is cool. I respect it. I know I can be a little on the softer side with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No. I apologies if I ever push you. I'm like, hey, let's go. Come on, let's go. Let's get back potting. Come on. I'm tired
No,
of
that's
this.
how yeah, that's how Dino treats me. Everybody, he's just like, well, you're not feeling well, fucking, stand up, man, let's go.
Yeah.
That's the dynamic.
We do the show sitting down. We can do this. Um, all right. So a little bit disappointing. Not the best Emma Hayes showing. I think probably maybe a tournament. Definitely a day that I think she'd want back. I don't think anything really worked today, unfortunately. Um, and even when you think about what did we talk about last show, the link up between the Thompson sisters, like
Mhm.
the ungodly, connectivity between those two, the chemistry that, obviously, dates way, way, way back before their professional ball. But you have Alyssa out there. You don't have Giselle out there. And Giselle, I think probably, I don't think there's any argument there, outplayed Alyssa against
Sure.
Australia. You don't put Giselle out there, and it kind of takes a little bit of the bite from Alyssa's game as well. So I think the combinations were absolutely lacking. Um, I'm having having a really tough time trying to key in on some of the positives, which is tough. And you know me, I'm not the type to be like, okay, we lost. Let's do an hour on kind of what went wrong, but not
Right.
a ton went right today. Like I think it's just kind of the way it broke out.
I think that's right, man. I think they just got outplayed. Like they didn't look as fast as Japan. They didn't look as organized as Japan. They couldn't hold the ball as well as Japan. I mean, I do think the possession ended up being like 51-49, 52-48. I think it was somewhere in that ballpark. But we also know that Japan can play without the ball and then, crush you on the counter. So they don't
Mhm.
necessarily need to hold it for that long. They just kind of started to, run the clock, later in the match. So yeah, I don't think it doesn't have to be overwhelmingly negative to say there weren't a lot of positives, if that makes any sense. I don't know if the universe will allow for those two things to be true at the same time, but the other players get paid too. And when it comes to Japan, you have a lot of elite players who I mentioned are in form and in season. I know they have NWSL players on that roster, but they're players who are really cooking out there. Were just ready to play, and they just looked sharper than USA in this one.
Yeah, shout out to Dark, who's got Japan in his top four, or Japan in their top four. Apologies.
Yeah.
Um, no arguments there at all. All right, so yeah, I think we covered a ton of ground here. Any kind of final thoughts on the match?
Um, it's like I always say, it's never time to hit the panic button. I don't believe in that. And obviously we never said it was. We know it's early in the cycle. It didn't go well. You got beat by a very good team. You had an experimental roster. I just think um, we're walking away with Macario. And obviously, Kat Macario, people have known she's been great for a long time, but we can feel great about Macario again in the sense that she's coming back from this injury and she seems to be in just dynamite form. We feel great about Macario. We feel great about Sentnor. We feel great about Ryan. We feel great about Johannes. Those are a lot of positives. You should feel good about Jaden Shaw. Real quick shout out, Jenna Neiswanger in the Colombia match, she had a real physical play against Pavi where she just like really bodied the shit out
Yeah,
of her. And I was like, I'm going to put that one in the memory banks. And she had some more physical play today. And I have to think that she she probably figured out that she needs to add a little bit of that to her game, especially not, she makes the move to Arsenal. She's going to
hmm
have to add that to her bag. And I think she may have realized I got to add this to my tool set if I want to get more minutes in Team USA.
yeah, and Pavi gave it to her early in that. They were going back and forth a little bit, and I think
Right.
Nicewarmer was like, "Nah, this is not happening." And anytime you move to the WSL, you already kind of know what you're signing up for sure.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of takeaways for me, I think probably what I'm going to remember from this tournament is obviously one foot in the past, one foot in the future,
Mm.
and I think that dichotomy essentially sinking this tournament for the USA because the chemistry just was not working between those two camps, unfortunately. And I think when you think about what the future looks like, I think Yasmin Ryan's involved, Macario, who you mentioned, Sentnor, obviously, Johannes and Hutton. I mean, I was
Yeah.
bummed that we didn't get Hutton, and obviously, it could be a load management issue. Young player, you don't want to put too many miles on her with short rest. Um, but that was a player that I think could have made a difference. Again, the midfield, I'll continue to kind of lament our ineffectiveness there. And
Mm.
yeah, shout out to Kristen, who I think is on my same page. Puts it very succinctly. It seems Hayes protecting Horan by not allowing Bethune, Macario, or Shaw to run the 10 with the first string attackers is a real problem. Um,
Mm.
totally agree there. I think it's absolutely time to kind of turn the page. And we saw enough glimpses from players that don't have a ton of caps. Giselle Thompson, Emma Sears, Michelle Cooper. Like these are players that came in and had good performances. Obviously, Japan's a different beast, but it would have been nice to kind of see, some evolution of some kind of core, that would have culminated in this final that, some of the young players could have like, maybe fought through. But I think
Mm.
the last 35, 40 minutes, it felt like the USA was resigned to, okay, this is just not going to happen unless we get lucky, which was a tough look.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I marked in the 55th minute in my notes, the crowd was out of it at 55, like completely
Mm-hmm.
out of it. They ended up. You see it happen a lot in football. So that's 5 minutes after the Koga goal. And I was like, yo, you could hear a pin drop in there. And now what you do see a lot in football is after the Kumagai Horan collision, the crowd kind of gets back into it after the restart of play and all that. But there was a good 6 to 7 minute stretch there where the crowd, you could just hear in the crowd, they were stunned, and it felt like sometimes that almost like, and this is probably some hocus pocus nonsense that I'm doing, but like it feels like sometimes when you're watching the match, it is permeating through the squad, through the home team when that kind of thing happens. And I like your description using the term rudderless at times. They couldn't keep possession, and they're just kind of looking around at each other like, what do we do now?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not wrong because they ran out of ideas pretty clearly. The best look in the last 20 minutes was probably, well, Shaw had a good look, and then it's the Tierna Davidson shot from distance that I think works its way from maybe Sam. I mean, Sam Coffey was involved in that buildup, but you're going Sam Coffey to Tierna Davidson. It's like this is our the best look we can kind of muster over the last half an hour outside of a Jaden Shaw. Kind of like drive and strike. Tough, tough tournament. Not the end of the world for sure. I think some positive to build on, but yeah, I think maybe I'm not sure we left the title. I'm not sure we left the cup on the table, but I think we left an opportunity on the table for a little bit more growth. By sort of like defining a little firmer identity. As it pertains to maybe that next generation.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that play that you talk about, I'm glad you mentioned that. It was when it was Linby and Dolo who like left it off for Tierna, and,
Right.
and Davidson has that in her game, as Nancy in the chat points out. It's the old give the ball to Tierna and let's see what happens play, which I like it as a smart move from Biondolo to leave it off. I wish Davidson was maybe a little bit closer to the goal when she rips that shot, but like you said, not encouraging when that's your best chance, but a lot of time. I'm looking forward even more now to the two matches against Brazil, because Brazil's going to smell blood in the water and be like, okay, what's your roster going to look like in a month? Let's go play some football.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, talking about the cycle, Spain's not looking quite like Spain. If the U.S. is not looking quite like the U.S., Japan ascending, England, obviously in solid position, Brazil, obviously, on the way up, Colombia a little bit, little middling. I still maintain they're a top 12 team. Talk about that one later.
We're getting to that.
27 World Cup now looking a lot more like an open field. Very, very exciting stuff. And still a lot of time, for the U.S. to kind of like continue to firm up that identity, figure out who's going where, and continue to develop some chemistry.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely interesting. 27 World Cup, looking forward to it. Obviously, England, the Lionesses, are going to win their second straight Euros in 2025. Well, we already see how that's going to work. And so, yeah, we'll just see how the way the rest of the world shakes out from there.
All right, man. Anything else you want to hit before we get out of here?
I think that's it, man. I got a meeting in the morning. It's 10. I'm going to complain. It's 10:44 p.m. in Seattle. It's like 1,000,000 o'clock where you are. How late is it? Is it nearly 2 a.m. on the East Coast? I don't know how time works.
Well, first of all, for Sindre and myself, it's Thursday. So let's start there.
There you go.
Yeah. Just a shade before 2 a.m. Appreciate all the West Coasters rocking with us. Appreciate the East Coasters even more for rocking with us. All right, man. I think we did it just like the Japan team did this evening. This has been another episode of Into the Channel. Thank you for hanging out with your boys. Like if you liked. Oh, real quick look ahead. We've got some great shows coming down the pike. So end of this week, your boys are going to do our first annual NWSL team draft where we pick 7 teams. I've got 7. You've got 7. And we're going to sort of like carve out some territory. You're going to have your teams that you're covering, obviously Orlando, my domain, Seattle, your domain. And then we're going to figure out what other teams are going to be within those given domains. That way, we can have our go-to, we'll figure out what our beats are for the 2025 season. We also have a great interview coming down the pike with Claire McEwen, author of a great book on the women's soccer, history of women's soccer. She Can Kick It, the history of women's football across the world. Appreciate you helping me out there, buddy. You already know you're my you're the 10 to my 9. Absolutely, I always appreciate you there. Anyway,
Likewise, go ahead.
Sorry for stepping on you. Like, if you like, make sure you're rocking with us. Subscribe, follow YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you like to watch or listen. We want to hear from you. We love hearing from you. Leave us a review over your favorite podcast app. Links to all of our socials except one in the show notes of this episode. And again, thanks for everybody for hanging out with us live, and a big thank you to my co-host as well, Mr. Grand Angle, for always showing up in the championship matches. I mean, somebody that I can count on all the time. Like I said, the 10 to my 9, all we do is score goals. Doesn't matter. Wednesday, Thursday, Eastern, Pacific. You already know. That's my guy. I appreciate you, bro.
Likewise, buddy. Appreciate you staying up. And thank you to everybody for rocking with us in the chat. I would be remiss. One more quick one from Melanie. That offside call that wasn't actually offside call on Niswanger. Terrible job by the refs. Okay, we did a live show, and I complained about refereeing at least once. I think we've done it, my good man. Again, thank you everybody for hanging out with us tonight, and we will see you all next time.